Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Frenemies, all those wonderful characters who helped the Winchesters when they weren't trying to kill them. So before we get started, let's let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Hildy.
Hi, I'm Hildy Silverman. I was the publisher of Space and Time magazine for about 12 years. I'm a fiction author and a member of the Crazy 8 Press Authors Collective, and huge Supernatural fan. Watched since the very, very beginning, all through, more than once, and very excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which are the frenemies on this show, because there's a lot of good ones.
There are. Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Malcolm. I'm the director of the Urban Fantasy Track at DragonCon, and where we do cover Supernatural. I cover books and media, and Supernatural is one of the television shows that I'm fortunate enough to get to cover. And I too have been a fan since the show began, watched it from the very beginning, and am now in a rewatch of the whole series as part of our virtual content for the track. We're calling it Supernatural Rewind. And actually tomorrow night, anybody might, well, this won't be seen until later, but if you want to tune in July, there will be season 6 before we have to take a break. But we're doing one a month. And just before we get started, I thought I would make clear my preference for who's the best for me.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway. That's just me.
Nice. Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker, and I'm a writer and editor, former journalist, and I came late to the Supernatural universe, but I went completely down the rabbit hole, and I'm an unabashed Dean girl. I was the editor of an anthology that is about music in North and South Carolina called Making Notes. And I also helped Ann Moses of Tiger Beat fame write her memoir about her time at Tiger Beat in the late 60s and early 70s when she hung out with the Monkees and Bobby Sherman and all those folks.
Oh, the heartthrobs of my young adulthood, yes.
Exactly.
So adolescence, whatever, yeah.
Yes. Oh, and I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce is Gail. I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future, post-apocalyptic fiction, and more. As Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all of the modern series are worlds that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I'm excited to be doing the Rewind panels with Carol's urban fantasy track for DragonCon. And because the Supernatural panels at DragonCon are always some of my favorite panels. So lots of stuff going on and lots more Supernatural content for all the fans out there. But I came late to the party like Anne, didn't get into it until halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months to be ready for season 12, and really haven't come up for air since then.
That's true, you really haven't.
I haven't. I haven't fangirled about something like this for a long time. Until my Tiger Beat days, yeah.
Yeah, I had a Bobby Sherman poster, that's all I'm saying. I did. When I was 13, there was one on the wall in my room.
Wow.
True story.
But yeah, I hear you.
Remind me to tell you about meeting Mickey Dolenz.
Oh my, yeah.
I met him in the green room at DragonCon one year.
Really?
So,
oh, wow, nice.
Guy in front of me at the bar, and he turned around and was like, well, okay, you never know who you're going to meet.
True.
Back to frenemies.
Yeah.
So I think the word frenemies was coined on the TV show Friends, I think, where it's it refers to somebody who sometimes they're helping you out and sometimes they're helping to stab you in the back. You never know which you're going to get. And Supernatural had more than its share of wonderful characters that kind of kept you and the Winchesters on their toes. So, Anne, let's start with the top. Who's your favorite frenemy?
Crowley. I'm with Carol. Crowley, I think, just embodied. I mean, Mark Sheppard. First of all, Mark Sheppard is such a great actor, and he would go from chewing the scenery to sacrificing, and the whole scene of when they try to make him human again. I mean, that just is heartbreaking, and it could have been hokey, but because of the history of his character, but it wasn't. And then the tenderness that he showed with his son, I thought was really amazing, considering, other times he just was that way. It was just in most cases, it was a really well-written character, and Mark Sheppard played it to a T. And his friendship with the boys, his frenemyship with the boys was just an amazing thing to me. And I just, and he had all the good nicknames for Sam. And it always amuses me that they would flash on his phone when Dean would call him, and it would say, "Not Moose."
Not Moose, yeah.
Plus, and I have to mention this, he had the best line that would have tongue-tied anybody else about torture. And I can't even say it. I'm not even going to attempt it. But I mean, I don't think anybody else could have carried that off either. So I just think he was just a great addition, and a great foil for the boys, who they weren't always good either. And he wasn't always bad. And I just thought that his character was great. And I hate the way it ended. I really do. I just think they should have done something else with that, but that's me.
Carol?
Well, of course, this is the third time I'm bringing him up. I won't. I'll not do it anymore. But I think I think definitely Crowley. And when since we've been doing the rewind, I couldn't remember exactly which season he first appeared in. Well, we're doing season 5 this month. So when he first showed up, of course, I saw his name in the credits before I saw him, but I was very excited. I was like, oh, finally. I think that he captured your kind of your sensibilities and your imagination first, with the humor with which he delivers, his lines, his persona. Even though we do know even in the very beginning, for him, the beginning of his part of the story is that we don't know whether they can completely trust him or not. So he fits that perfectly. But, we come to see over time that, he's probably one of the better people to have in their corner when it comes down to it. And I think that even though it was that aspect of his personality, that, that humorous kind of devil may care attitude that he had, I think that he proved himself by, as the series goes on, and his storylines that he was part of, we get to see that there's a lot more to him. You get to understand, especially after you meet Rowena, to see not just the bits and pieces that you heard about, but you see it demonstrated. Then he becomes even, it becomes more clear what he's really like, I think. And I'm sorry that he left the series, but I felt as though the way he did it was nice, that he got a redemptive arc there, that he was able to do something good, and not that just, that he died in an alley somewhere. You know what I'm saying? To me, it was a meaningful death. Anyway, let's put it that way.
Okay. Hildy?
Well, I'm also a huge Crowley fan, but since we've covered, I feel like covered him perfectly, the two of you. I am going to go with my second favorite, which is Rowena. I adore Rowena. I adore the actress who plays her. She's so little and adorable.
Yeah,
But
she is.
she's such a badass. Like, she's so powerful, and you buy, I buy her character. I bought her as the wicked witch who didn't give a crap about her son, and then I bought her as becoming regretful and changing over time due to her time with the boys and her experience with Lucifer, which was not so great, and how that turned out. She really changed over time, but I felt like it was a natural progression. I especially liked the relationship she formed with Moose, with Sam.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Kind of a pseudo motherly relationship there. There was this deep connection, and ultimately, of course, she too sacrificed herself for them, although she got a great reward in becoming Queen of Hell, so that worked out well. But she didn't know that at the time. She was just willing to do that. So yeah, I really adore Rowena and her whole arc.
Yeah, I mean, they're really my top two as well. I think that Mark Sheppard was ready to move on because they really weren't doing anything exciting and new with his character. That's my guess, anyhow. And he wasn't getting maybe challenged. It seemed that way from some of the ways, some of the things that had happened recently. But he did go out a hero, and he had a wonderful sense of comedic timing, and even his double crosses were amusing. So yeah, he definitely number one up there. And then I'm with you on Rowena because she was so badass, but then you came to see how hurt she had been and how tragic her background had been. And you were really glad when she, got the upper hand on those snobby witches, and Dean used his witch killing bullets. So yeah, she was terrific. And then Sam kind of becomes her witchcraft heir, which for a Winchester is kind of a big deal. Mm-hmm. And who'd have thought? So yeah, and then Queen of Hell. I mean, walk in and act like you own the place, and then set up receptions for the new souls, because why not? If Crowley could make them stand in line for eternity, honestly, there's nothing more painful than having to be at some cocktail parties for eternity. That might not have been as nice as it sounded.
Right.
Well, I have to go back to I always thought when she emerged as the Queen of Hell, I went back to season 14, episode 1, when Sam goes to rescue Cass, and he fights that one demon who wants the same deal that with the Winchesters that Crowley had. And so Sam and Bobby, I think AU Bobby and some of the other ones come in and fight as well. And then Sam just declares, and I wrote it down, there will be no new king of hell, not today, not ever. And if anybody wants the job, you can come through me. Well, Rowena went through Sam, and she's the Queen of Hell.
Yeah.
So I just thought, I don't know if they knew that was coming, in the end, eventually, or what, but it just, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I also, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I also appreciated and got a kick out of the way that later in season 15, which, as we know, felt as though it went on for a while, with the big break there. It was funny when every once in a while there would be a demon who showed up for some reason or other, and they would make reference to, oh yeah, well, Rowena is having us do such and such now. I mean, they would make those comments, and I thought that was funny because it made it seem, it was like just in case you forgot, this is what she's doing now. But it was just funny to hear them. They were kind of matter of fact about it. They weren't complaining, or they weren't crowing about it. It was just a comment. And I just always thought that was funny.
I also noticed that the demons were snappier dressers after Rowena took over.
Yeah, She had
not
certain
plain old
standards.
business suits, but they
Yeah.
you know, they were snappy after that. So yeah, she had a definite positive influence. And seeing Ruth in person at a convention, I think one of the things that surprised me the most is that is her actual accent.
Yeah.
I thought for
Right.
sure
Yeah.
it was, but it is. It's just that heavy. And one of the things she talked about was that if she'd have stayed in London, everybody kept wanting her to lose the accent. If she went to Canada or the United States, everybody thought the accent was great. So why wouldn't she? So, you
I
know,
love whenever she would say asparagus, the way she said
Yeah.
it, I just love that.
yeah. So no, they were terrific frenemies. Now, who else comes to the top of mind when it comes to Winchester frenemies? Carol?
I would say Hendrickson, simply because he started out that way. I mean, he started out as obviously an enemy, but he was also basing his feelings about them on just kind of surface information. He didn't have any idea what was going on. Once he learns what is really behind what they do, he's kind of like, okay, he takes a back seat and is like, you tell me what to do. And I thought it was a shame that he ended up dying, because it would have been, I mean, in that same at that same time in that episode, because it would have been nice, even though we do see him again, it's not in a good way, but I think it would have been nice if he would have been a good ally, for them to have had, over the years. It wouldn't hurt to have somebody that was actually part of one of these organizations that was on their side and had a clue about what they were doing. And I think it could have added kind of an extra layer to the different stories that they had going on. But I would put him in that category for that reason, that he did that. What I felt was a very believable switch over in that episode, kind of like, well, I know, okay, here's somebody who could maybe actually save my life. Maybe I had ought to listen to them. And then he's willing to admit that he had made a mistake.
Yeah.
He didn't.
I really liked the character of Hendrickson too. I thought that he was in it. He was in several episodes, I think, but that was the big one.
3 or 4.
Yeah. And one frenemy who, along the same lines, since she was in law enforcement, was Diana Ballard, who was played by Linda Blair.
Mm-hmm.
And same sort of story arc, where she didn't believe it at first and was convinced that they were these real reprobates and guilty of murder and everything, and then she realizes what's going on and lets them go. And that's I like that they occasionally had stories like that where people didn't know what was going on and then became believers, not unlike Jody and Donna too, but they weren't really enemies in the same way
Right.
Diana was, because she was ready to throw the book at them both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hildy?
And she would have been fun to see again too.
Yeah,
yeah.
she would have been.
Yeah, she was good. I have a warm spot for Meg, who, kind of obviously had different people portraying, but I thought was an interesting dynamic. I liked snarky Meg. That she would be, she was always in it for herself and you knew it, but sometimes when everything aligned, and okay, being on the Winchester side works for me. I like their dynamic. I like the way they worked together, and she snarked, but she did, she held up her end when she had to. I thought she was an intriguing character. Also very fond of Balthazar. A lot of that because I just love that actor. He's so great. He's been in so many different things, and I'm of course now I blank on his name. But he's so terrific, and I thought he would
Sebastian.
Thank you, Sebastian
Roche.
Roche. Roche, yes. Thank you so much. I really enjoy him. He had sort of a Crowley-esque thing going with the boys as well. But although I think they made him side even more solidly with them faster, I thought. But I did enjoy him a lot too.
The angel that sank the Titanic because he hated Celine Dion.
Right.
And hey, that made me love him.
Oh, it was hilarious, yes.
Oh yeah, Balthazar would have been fun to see more of. He was almost kind of a Loki character in that he had a little more Loki going for him than some of the other frenemies because he just sort of exuded that trickster piece. Unlike, I mean, no one compares to the trickster, but he enjoyed kind of causing some chaos there, whether it was sending them to an alternate universe in the French Mistake or sinking the Titanic. He just kind of enjoyed that. I loved Meg, more Meg 2.0. I thought Meg 1.0 was a definite enemy and she did great with that. But when Rachel Miner took over, there was a different vibe there. And, she even stepped in to take care of Cass when he took Sam's wall madness onto himself. And then we sort of ended up with Meg Steele, kind of. Which was interesting. Angel, demon, why not?
Sure.
They're kind of cute.
It's supernatural after all, yeah.
That's right. That's right. He learned it from the pizza man. And for Donna Ballard, yeah, I love that character. And, you really have to give these people like Henriksen and Ballard credit because Sam and Dean have lived with this supernatural stuff all their lives. Other people had longer periods of time to go, what, really? This stuff is real? Ballard and Henriksen had to deal with it on the fly and react and not die while they're processing it and still do their jobs. And so that takes some mental flexibility just to be able to cope with that kind of a point of view shift in the middle of trying not to die. And you got to give them credit for that, which I thought was good writing and interesting character development. I would have loved to have seen both of them hang around longer. Now, what about Bella? She's definitely at the top of the frenemy list too.
I don't know that I'd put her in that category personally.
Okay.
I think that she was always out for herself and that the only reason that she ever did anything for them was if it benefited her. Whereas I think in the case of the others that we've mentioned, that they, sometimes would be like, oh, well, I haven't got anything to lose by helping them, so why not? Because maybe then they'll owe me, kind of thing. But I would not put Bella in that category personally, just because that's the way I felt about her. Her story was terrible. When we finally find out in the last episode why she was the way she was, it was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And everything she did was, always for her own good and not for them at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hildy Green. Oh, okay.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I kind of agree with that she might have aligned herself with the boys from time to time, but I never felt the same, that there was any yielding, that there was any actual tentative friendship there, actual caring there from Bella. I just didn't get that sense. There was always, I'm just putting this on because it works for me now. Whereas the other frenemies, there were clear indications that there was actual caring, that there were real bonds formed, that they actually changed and became better. But I didn't quite get that from her.
I think that both of you are probably right, but she really wanted to sleep with Dean.
Well, she had eyes,
And don't forget Sam's erotic dreams. That was hilarious.
Well, yeah, that was.
He was so uncomfortable after. That was funny.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
I read an interview with Kripke who said that he thought that they had actually made a mistake by not making her more sympathetic earlier, because between the fans not wanting to see her in a romantic relationship with Dean, and not wanting and not liking her because she didn't give us anything to like, that they wrote her out fairly quickly, although she did get a not a redemption arc, but we did see a little more about why she did what she did as she was dying. So, you know, it didn't really help. And he had said that he thought if they had shown some of that up front, the fan reaction to her might have been better than it was.
I can agree with that. That makes a lot of sense.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
I liked that she was clever and sneaky, and she made a worthy opponent because she wasn't easy to catch. And I always wondered if they'd have let her stick around as long as, you know, we saw Crowley and Rowena stick around as an enemy before it started to change, if it would have felt different. She was just, she would have kept them on their toes.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Even if they kept her just a straight up enemy, like, okay, you're just the enemy. Yeah, that could have worked.
Yeah, who occasionally does them a good turn, like you said, because it's in her interest.
Right.
But really, Crowley and Rowena started that way too, and then it became more. So the
Right.
boys had sort of effect on people.
They did. They got a lot of frenemies along the way because of
Right.
it.
And it was sort of the opposite with Gordon, where at first they thought they could trust him and he was friendly, and he thought that, you know, they were the famous Winchesters. And then he became a real enemy because he believed that Sam was the Antichrist or whatever. And so I'm not a Gordon fan. So, but it's the opposite of what we've been talking about, where the characters are enemies at first and then they evolve, which I think you're right, Gail, that they didn't give Bella that kind of a story arc. And I would totally agree with what Kripke said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gordon was definitely, you know, when we first meet him, it's like, oh, good, other hunters. The boys need help. Their dad's gone. They could use, look, he's been around, you know, maybe he'll help. And then you realize the guy's psycho. And he quickly becomes an enemy. But I thought the actor played the role so convincingly. And
Oh yeah, good actor. Good
Yeah, he's amazing.
yeah, there's nothing more scary than somebody who is doing horrible things, fully convinced that they are doing, you know, it for a good cause, no matter how terrible. And Gordon just nailed that.
Yeah, you could see his point. I mean, Sam was kind of going to be, you know, Lucifer's vessel and evil. He wasn't entirely wrong.
Yeah. Carol, any thoughts on Gordon?
Well, of course, the first thing I thought of is my husband and I are also big This Is Us fans. So I was like, I had forgotten that he was in the show, that the actor was in the show. I remembered the character of Gordon, but not who played him, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, because it was so long ago that I'd seen the episodes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten all about this. And, you know, so that was kind of interesting. And also to note that I will say he doesn't look any different now. 15 years later, he looks just the same age. So good for him. But in any case, a long way to come from playing Gordon to being Randall Pearson on This Is Us. But hey, and I think in the very beginning, I think Sam knew something was off about him. That was the feeling I had. But for Dean, he was kind of playing up to Dean anyway, because he was trying to appeal to the parts of Dean that were kind of like him, in terms of, here we are, the seasoned hunters, and we're you know, we just do what has to be done. But when he starts saying all these things like that, you know, that there is no gray area, there's only black or white in this field in what we do. Even then, Dean was kind of, you know, by then Dean is starting to have a few thoughts about that kind of thing already himself. But to hear it coming out of somebody else's mouth, he's starting to say, whoa, well, maybe that is, you know, you can see the wheels turning in his head. And of course, then we see what happens in that particular episode with Amber Benson's character, the vampire. And I don't know. I thought he was a good character that they needed to have as kind of a foil to show this is what could become of you if you didn't have any kind of a moral compass. Because, you know, we've talked about this a lot in the Rewind episodes and even the season overview panels that we've done at DragonCon the last few years, is that one of the things that I've always found that was important to me as a viewer and as a fan of the show is that, you know, it isn't black and white. You don't just kill something because it's a supernatural being. You have, you know, there are many reasons not to do that. You kill them because bad, you know, I mean, that's one of the things. There's a conversation between Sam and Dean where during this time with Gordon, and he says, well, that's what we do. Dean says, well, that's what we do. We kill supernatural. And Sam says, no, we kill evil, not the supernatural. So I think that having Gordon as part of their story really helped them, you know, helped kind of solidify that attitude to make it so that they were more open to the idea that just because something is this other kind of creature, they're not always going to be bad. And that's going to be the case all the way down the line.
Well, and even John's black and white views on things, I think by the time they ran into Gordon, seeing Dean start to kind of recoil from that shows how much Dean had already grown and reconsidered from just, you know, the attitudes he was brought up with, and questioning and breaking with his father, which he wasn't prepared to do at the very beginning of the series.
Yeah.
He so worshiped John, you know, and that's how he had been brought up. This is how you hunt, you know, supernatural evil. They were the same thing. And I think that's a key part of the evolution of the character and actually part of the role these frenemies played in their lives by interacting with and learning that, yeah, they might come from a darker place, but some of them could actually change or be better or be helpful or have some decent attributes. That was part of, I think, the whole growth of Dean's character were these interactions.
Well, the other thing I thought was interesting, and this goes in the, you know, what if category, was I'd also read an article that was talking about, you know, at the end of season 3, there was the writer's strike. So it was a very short season and they didn't get to do, I mean, they basically were short 5 or 6 or 7 episodes from their normal, they had 16. So from their normal 22 or 23 episode run. And there had been at least some consideration of Sam embracing more of his powers to try to save Dean, but then they didn't get to do that. And that kind of makes you wonder where things would have gone if that had happened. I know I have read some fanfics where Sam embraces his destiny as the boy king of hell and walks into hell to get Dean out, and boy, that changes up the script a bit. So yeah, I agree with you on Gordon, and but I thought he was played exceptionally well.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And, yeah, and even though he wasn't in very many episodes, I mean, just look at how much of an impact he made. Even so that's pretty impressive. Now, if we're going to talk about frenemies, there's Gabriel.
Oh yeah.
Thinking about Gabriel, and I adore that character too. He's right up there with Crowley and Rowena with me, and I just love the way that Dick Spate, I don't know how to say his last name.
Spate.
Spate. Okay. I just love the way he plays him, and talk about somebody with the comedic timing and just the whole aura that he puts on, and they wrote such great things for him with, you think he's dead, but no, he's not. and
Surprise.
with the Wicker stuff, and I just thought that he just portrayed that character really well. And Gabriel, I think, teaches them a lot as well, and it goes from, you know, trying to please themselves, no, not really please themselves, but he's also trying to push them in a way. I mean, he comes up with all this stuff, you know, this is your destiny, Lucifer, Michael, you know, why do you think you the two of you are brothers, my brothers, you know, and he's trying to push them toward that destiny in a way. And I have to think that maybe it was reverse psychology, that he was trying to fight against what Zach and the other angels were trying to do in his own particular Gabriel way.
I love,
Interesting point.
yeah, I love him too, that actor. I enjoyed him as the trickster, and then the whole Gabriel switcheroo. I liked, he can be funny, but he could also bring menace when he had to, you know. When Gabriel had to smack down and get tough, his whole expression would change, and you would see like, oh, right, this is an archangel. He was really great in that role. And I just loved that he was more of a comedic foil to the boys along the way, you know, throwing them in these wacky situations, but he was always entertaining. I always looked forward to episodes with him in it.
Yeah, and it's funny how every time that they ended up in some kind of a situation that seemed off, or that seemed as though it was contrived in some way, that it wasn't a naturally occurring thing, that they would be like, it must be him. I mean, you know, this is who they wanted to blame it on, whether it was him or not. So
Yeah, which would make sense. Someone keeps doing things like that to you, jerking you around. You start
Right.
to think it's them all the time.
Well, there were very few other frenemies that they faced, if any, who could manipulate time and space. You know, he had those particular abilities as an archangel. And while Lucifer and Michael were always, and Raphael were always about the smiting, Gabriel was kind of always trying to find the other possibilities. And that was just a lot more creative. And so, yeah, he wasn't always completely on their side, but in the end, he was when the chips were down. So that's what counted.
Yeah.
yeah, because when he first explained why he'd left heaven in the first place, it was because, you know, he might enjoy a little bit of chaotic fun, you know, sometimes which ended in the death of humans, but we've already seen what, you know, they don't always value human life the way that most of us do. But, you know, that was kind of an ingrained thing, I think, with all of the angels. It was, you know, especially the archangels. But, you know, he was just, I don't know, more inclined to want to help them, because I think he came around to seeing things more from their point of view. And, you know, Dean tells him off when they put him in the angel fire ring, and they figure talking to him, and Dean says it's not really about, you know, your brothers fighting, it's about you not being able to stand up to your family. And the whole reason he left in the first place is because he didn't want to see the constant infighting, you know, so he was more interested in fun. Yeah, I love the way he described himself as being in witness protection.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, in some ways he had that in common with Sam, because Sam really hated the constant fighting between him and John at the time he left for Stanford.
Right.
And Gabriel didn't like being stuck in the middle between Lucifer and Michael and having to pick sides and having to put up with the constant drama. So, you know, Supernatural definitely loves its mirror images.
Mhm.
Well, as we come to the end, I think we've got time for one really big frenemy, and that is death, both Old Death and Billy. So what's there to say about that?
Well, I love the character of Death, the way with the original Death. Julian Richings was just fabulous. I mean, talk about an entrance when he does that, and then the guy dies. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it was just, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And-
bumping into him was one thing, but insulting him, that was, or being a jerk about it, that was something else.
Exactly. Exactly. And I love the quirkiness that they gave him of loving pizza and
Mhm.
junk food, and that, you know, Dean cooks for him. and yet he helps them against the four horsemen and or against the other horsemen, and trying to open the gate to kill Lucifer. And yeah, it just, I really like the balance of his character.
Well, and even before that, he helped get Sam's soul back.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. You're right. And but I'm less fond of Billy. I mean, at first I thought she was an interesting character, not really a friend, not really an enemy, just sort of there at certain times, but then she helped him a couple of times. But I really, toward the end, I was, after she became Death, you had to question her motives and her whole, you know, the rules has to be this way kind of thing. So
Yeah, I felt like Old Death, original recipe Death, was more of the frenemy. He
Mhm.
was, you know, he did a lot, like you mentioned, saving Sam's soul and such. He really seemed to be much more firmly in the boys' camp. Whereas Billy, I think, and certainly it ended up this way, was it became an enemy. She was just so sick of them coming back to life all the time. One could understand
How
if you're
dare
deaf
you? Yeah.
all the time, especially Dean. Come on. That I think, I mean, I like the actress, I like the performance, but the her status with them, it definitely changed the whole dynamic. She was not I felt she was not
Mhm.
a enemy, she was an enemy. She wanted, even if once in a while a few things aligned between them, ultimately she wanted these guys to die and stay dead already. She was done.
yeah.
It's almost like, you know, every time you guys die, I got to do paperwork. Enough.
Right.
I've done the paperwork on you. How many times? Not again.
Your
Yeah.
folder's this thick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
Yeah.
I have to mention one other frenemy if we're through talking about Death. Carol, did you want to say something about Death?
Well, no, just that, I mean, I agree with, you know, what you both have been, or what all three of you have been saying. I thought that, and I actually just rewatched in my preparation for Rewind, watched the episode last night where he makes his first appearance. So that was very fresh in my mind. And, you know, that was a great appearance. That was a great scene. He and Dean sitting there, and he's, you know, he's telling Dean eat, and you know, he gives him, he serves him a piece of pizza, and, you know, just treating him just like anybody else. And Dean's like, so are you going to kill me now? It's like, if I wanted you dead, you'd be dead before you got in the door. You know, that kind of thing. And so, you know, at that point you knew there was something more to it. And he did, you know, in the arc as that character, you do get to see him, you know, help them. And it's not only for his own good. He's doing some things because, as I said about some of these other people, it's kind of like, oh, well, you know, it's not any skin off my back if I help them out, so I may as well, you know, maybe they'll owe me later. So I do agree also that by the end, it was that Billy was, had it up to here, and that she was no longer in the frenemy camp at that point in those last couple of episodes that we are in.
Well, and also thinking about Old Death, he had the graciousness, kind of like the old-fashioned graciousness that when Sam wanted to die after the trials, Death came personally to reap him and said it was an honor to do so. And then Sam stood him up, which kind of pissed him off. But that was kind of an old-fashioned graciousness that we never really saw in like Billy. And then he came when Dean needed to get rid of the mark. Now, his suggestions were pretty horrific, but Dean was ready to take any advice on getting rid of the mark and do anything. And Death showed up, which is more than you could say for a lot of the beings they tried to summon. Carol, you had somebody else in mind.
I thought it was Anne.
It was
Anne.
Catch.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Good example.
Because I just adore Catch. And I mean, he made me mad at first, but then he was just so matter of fact about everything, and very much your cold-blooded killer. And we learned so much about how they were trained from the other character, Mick. We learned how they were trained at the Hogwarts School of Assassins, or whatever it was. And so, but then he came around to realizing what Sam and Dean's approach was, kind of like Mick came around, even though he was sort of a frenemy. We saw a lot more of Catch, and I think we saw his character change more over the arc of the stories that he was in. Then they just didn't let poor Mick. He changed, and then they killed him off, which was very sad because I liked both of those characters, and they were the good part of the British Men of Letters to me. Because I don't think to the end that Lady Bellin, or whatever her name was, she was always the enemy. She never came around. Right. But I'm convinced that Mick and Cat, well, of course we know that Catch sacrificed himself at the end. So, he was one of my favorite characters too.
Yeah, he was really good. It's like the mark of the ultimate frenemy is you die at some point for the boys. You're just doomed if you're a frenemy. Some point you're gonna sacrifice yourself for our boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it is written.
A lot of that going around.
Yeah. I'll just also throw out there, I thought the Darkness, our God's sister, she was, and boy, what a tragic end for her. She really tried to do right, and then she got her heart shattered and sucked up into God. I mean, that was really rough. And yeah, I know part of her freneminess was because she had the lusties for our Dean. They were bonded together, but still, she really did. She did her part. She was far from perfect, but she did her part. She tried, and especially at the end, she was really firmly working against God, right, and trying to get things on track, and just turned out horribly for her.
Yeah.
Carol, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree that Amara was a very interesting character evolution to watch. That they between her brother and Dean, they were able to kind of bring her, to rein her in enough to make it so that she decided, oh, well, maybe I won't destroy everything. This could be good. And she, when we see her in subsequent episodes every now and then, it's clear that she's kind of enjoying acting like a human, living as one, whether we know she wasn't, but I mean, she seemed to enjoy just being part of the world and, all of that. And she was happy to do that. And yeah, she got a really bad deal at the end there, but still did try to come through for them at times. And she did, and ultimately she did, but she, once again, paid the ultimate price for helping out the guys.
Mhm. Well, folks, we are actually at the end of our time. So thank you so much for, coming and chatting about all these frenemies. And I'm sure if we had unlimited time, we'd come up with some more shit. Crowley one more time. So if we
I just had to.
go around and let everybody know where they can find you online. Ann?
I'm on Facebook a lot under Ann Wicker. Just search my name. I'm also on Twitter as @AnnWicker, no spaces, and I'm on Instagram as Ann.Wicker2.
Cool. Carol?
Yes, the Urban Fantasy Track has a very active Facebook page that stays active all year long. If you just put in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, it will come right up. And that's where, as I said, the page is active all year long. We do have a Twitter account as well. So if you wanted to just find us, all you have to do is also put in DragonCon Urban Fantasy. We do have a YouTube channel where all of our past Rewind and future Rewind episodes can be found. And once again, if you just put in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, that YouTube channel will come up. And I hope that people will join us for some of those. Those are streamed live. So people can, if they log into StreamYard, can interact with us during the panel itself. And we always have a couple of people who do that, which is nice. So
Awesome.
anyway, that's where I'll be.
And Hildy?
You can find me online, Twitter @Hildy9595. I'm on Facebook. I do have a little Instagram that I sometimes do something on, but not very much. And you can find more information about me and a lot of the books I appear in, crazy8press.com, and various other publishers out there, and on the Northeast convention circuit, now that there's going to be one again, yay.
Yay.
Live and in person, you'll probably see me at several of those coming up in the next year or so.
Very nice.
Oh yeah, and I should add, I will be at DragonCon. So yeah.
I would hope so.
Well, and you can find me at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com, all the rest of the social media, some variation of that are in the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook. But most of the time, you can find me here on Continual. So thank you to our wonderful panelists. It's been another fantastic discussion. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.